Gah whispers of the Danube, a Roman frontier. The oil lamp flickers against the canvas walls, casting dancing shadows that seem to whisper secrets of their own. In this tent, somewhere along the great Danube River, a young scribe sits hunched over his writing tablet, stylus poised above the wax surface. The year is 167 of the Common Era, and Rome's northern frontier trembles with uncertainty. Outside, the sounds of a military camp settling into evening drift through the heavy fabric, the clank of armor being removed, the low murmur of soldiers sharing their daily bread, the distant whinny of horses tethered for the night. But here, in this small circle of golden light, there is only the scratch of bronze against wax, and the weight of words waiting to be born. His name has been lost to us across these 18 centuries. No grand monument bears his inscription. No historian recorded his deeds. He was simply one of hundreds, perhaps thousands, of scribes who followed the legions, documenting supplies, recording messages, keeping the vast machinery of empire turning with their careful, practiced hands. Yet tonight he writes something different. The wax tablet before him bears not inventories of grain or lists of the wounded. Instead, he has begun what he calls simply observations. Notes about the people he has met along this troubled frontier. Stories that seem too small for official dispatches, too human for military reports. Stories about women, mostly. The wives and daughters and mothers who live in the shadow of Rome's endless wars. Let me take you there, to that tent beside the Danube. Feel the rough wool of his cloak against your shoulders as the evening air grows cold. Smell the wood smoke from countless cooking fires, mingled with the earthy scent of the great river flowing endlessly toward the distant sea. Hear the way his stylus hesitates, then moves again, as he searches for words to capture what he has witnessed. The Marcomannic Wars, they would later be called. A series of conflicts that would test the very limits of Roman power along the northern borders. The Germanic tribes beyond the Danube had grown restless, pressing against the frontier with increasing boldness, and so the legions had marched north, carrying with them not just soldiers and weapons, but entire communities of support staff, merchants, families, and scribes. Our young man had joined this campaign not for glory, but for the steady pay and the promise of seeing lands beyond the familiar hills of his birth. He possessed the rare gift of literacy, could write in both Latin and Greek, and had learned enough of the local dialects to serve as an interpreter when needed. A useful man, but not an important one, not the sort whose name would echo through the ages. And perhaps that is exactly why his observations matter so much. He writes by the light of that single oil lamp, its flame fed by olive oil carried hundreds of miles from Mediterranean groves. The wick, made from twisted flax, burns with a steady golden glow that turns his brown hair bronze and deepens the concentration lines around his dark eyes. His fingers, stained with ink and calloused from years of writing, move with practiced efficiency across the wax surface. But tonight, those fingers pause more often than usual, because tonight he is trying to capture something that resists easy description. The way war changes not just the men who fight it, but the women who endure it. Earlier that day, the column had passed through a small settlement, barely more than a cluster of wooden houses surrounded by a low earthen wall, the kind of place that exists because it must, where the river bends and trade routes converge, where Roman coins and Germanic amber change hands in the dusty marketplace. A place caught between worlds, between the empire's reach and the wild lands beyond. The soldiers had stopped to water their horses and purchase supplies, standard procedure, carried out with the efficient politeness that marked Roman administration at its best. But our scribe had noticed something the others missed, or perhaps simply chose not to see. The The women of that settlement moved with a particular kind of wariness, not fear exactly, but watchfulness. The way they positioned themselves always within reach of a doorway, a path, an escape route. The way their conversations stopped and started again as the soldiers passed. The way they counted and recounted their children with quick, subtle glances. These were not Roman women protected by citizenship and law, nor were they fully Germanic, free to retreat deeper into the forests when trouble came. They were something in between. Frontier women, shaped by the constant presence of both opportunity and danger that marked life along the empire's edge. Our scribe had been assigned to inventory the grain purchased from the settlement stores, a simple task that brought him into the large wooden building that served as both granary and informal gathering place. And there he had overheard a conversation that lodged itself in his memory like a splinter. Two women speaking in the local dialect that he was still learning to understand. One older, perhaps 40, with silver threading through her brown hair. One younger, maybe 20, with a particular pallor that spoke of recent illness or worry. They stood among the sacks of barley and wheat, speaking in low voices while children played at their feet. The older woman was giving advice, or perhaps sharing hard-won wisdom, about which soldiers could be trusted and which could not, about how to hide valuables when armies passed through, about the signs that warned of raids from across the river and the different signs that warned of requisitions by Roman tax collectors. But mostly she was talking about endurance, about the art of surviving when you cannot control the forces that shape your world, about finding small spaces of safety and sanity in the midst of larger chaos. "We bend," she had said, using a word that could mean both physical flexibility and political accommodation. "We bend, so we do not break, but we remember who we are when the wind stops blowing." Now, hours later, our scribe finds himself trying to capture not just her words, but the tone in which she spoke them. Not bitter, exactly. Not resigned. Something more complex. Something that acknowledged both the weight of powerlessness and the quiet strength required to carry that weight with dignity. He thinks about his own mother, safe in her comfortable house in Gaul, protected by Roman citizenship and his father's modest government pension. He thinks about his sister, married to a prosperous merchant, worried about nothing more pressing than the quality of this year's wine harvest. What would they make of this frontier woman's wisdom? Would they understand the particular courage required to raise children in a place where armies pass through like weather, unpredictable, potentially devastating, but simply part of the landscape of life? The stylus moves again, carving letters into the soft wax. He writes carefully, knowing that wax can be smoothed and reused, but wanting to get the words right the first time. These observations feel important in a way he cannot quite articulate. Not important to the war effort, certainly. Not important to his commanding officers or the distant emperor who has never seen this frontier except on carefully drawn maps, but important nonetheless. Important because someone should notice. Someone should record. Someone should remember that history is made not just by the men who give orders and fight battles, but by the women who adapt and endure and find ways to protect what matters most when the world around them turns dangerous. Outside his tent, the sounds of the camp continue to settle into the rhythms of night. A sentry calls out the watch change. Somewhere, a man coughs. The deep, harsh sound that speaks of too many cold nights and too much dust breathed in during long marches. A horse stamps and snorts in the picket lines. But our scribe writes on, documenting not the grand sweep of empire, but the small, crucial moments of human connection that happen in its shadow. The way the older woman had touched the younger one's shoulder when she spoke of bending without breaking. The way the children had continued their games, even while their mothers discussed survival strategies. The way ordinary life persists, must persist, even when extraordinary forces threaten to overwhelm it. Tomorrow the column will move on, following the great river toward whatever destiny awaits them in the contested lands ahead. But tonight there is time for observation, for reflection, for the careful preservation of moments that might otherwise be lost to the vast indifference of time. The lamp flame wavers slightly as a breeze finds its way through the tent flaps. Our scribe steadies the light with one hand and continues writing with the other, recording whispers from the Danube frontier that will echo across centuries. The healer's touch, comfort in a time of war. The scribe sets down his stylus for a moment and gazes toward the settlement beyond the military encampment. Even at this hour, a soft glow emanates from one particular dwelling, a modest structure that has become the heart of healing for this frontier community. Her name is Livia, though the soldiers simply call her the healer. She moves through her small hut with the quiet efficiency of someone who has learned to find order within chaos. Tonight, as on so many nights before, her work continues long after others have sought their rest. The interior of her dwelling tells the story of a woman who has made peace with uncertainty. Bundles of dried herbs hang from the low wooden beams, chamomile and lavender from the river meadows, willow bark stripped and prepared for pain, yarrow gathered from the hillsides where wild flowers bloom despite the distant thunder of war. She has arranged her workspace with the care of someone who understands that healing begins with creating sanctuary. Clay vessels line rough-hewn shelves, each containing remedies she has prepared with her own hands. The larger pot holds a salve made from comfrey and beeswax, perfect for the cuts and bruises that seem to multiply in times of conflict. Smaller containers hold tinctures of echinacea and elderberry, weapons against the fevers that spread through crowded settlements. The wooden table that serves as her workspace bears the gentle scars of daily use. Here she grinds roots into powder, mixes poultices, and prepares the teas that bring comfort to those who seek her help. The mortar and pestle, worn smooth by countless preparations, rest beside a collection of bronze instruments, simple tools that serve complex purposes in her capable hands. Tonight she tends to a young mother whose infant struggles with colic. Livia's movements are deliberate, unhurried, as she prepares a gentle fennel tea. She measures the dried seeds with the precision of long practice, her fingers moving with the confidence that comes from years of healing work. "The baby will settle," she murmurs softly to the worried mother. "Sometimes the smallest stomachs need the gentlest help." Her voice carries the authority of experience without the harshness of judgment. She has learned that healing requires not just knowledge of herbs and remedies, but an understanding of the fears that accompany illness, especially here, where a simple fever can feel like a catastrophe when the nearest physician is days away. The healer's connection to the natural world around her runs deeper than mere botanical knowledge. She reads the seasons and the behavior of plants, understands which moon phases bring the most potent harvests, knows instinctively when to gather and when to wait. Earlier today, she walked the riverbank collecting fresh willow shoots. The trees seemed to whisper their secrets to her, which branches will yield the strongest medicine, which leaves carry the most healing properties. She moves through the landscape like someone who belongs to it, who has learned to listen to rhythms older than empires. Her garden, small but carefully tended, reflects this deep understanding. Rows of medicinal plants grow in neat abundance. Mint for digestive troubles, thyme for respiratory ailments, calendula for wounds that resist healing. She has coaxed life from this frontier soil through patient attention and gentle persistence. The local women have begun to seek her out not just for physical ailments, but for the comfort of her presence. There is something in her manner, a quality of deep listening, of genuine care, that makes confession feel safe. They bring her their worries along with their symptoms, and she treats both with equal seriousness. Tonight, an elderly man arrives at her door, his breathing labored and his color poor. She recognizes the signs immediately: the congestion that settles in the chest during the damp months along the river. Without a word, she guides him to the simple wooden stool beside her fire and begins preparing a steam treatment. Into a large clay bowl, she places dried eucalyptus leaves, pine needles gathered from the nearby forest, and a handful of fresh mint from her garden. The hot water releases their essential oils in fragrant clouds that seem to carry healing in their very essence. "Breathe slowly," she instructs, draping a cloth over his head and shoulders to capture the therapeutic steam. "Let the plants do their work." As he inhales the medicated vapors, she prepares a tea blend that will support his recovery. Coltsfoot for the cough, licorice root to soothe inflammation, honey to sweeten the sometimes bitter medicine. Her movements are economical, practiced, each action flowing naturally into the next. The old man's breathing gradually eases as the steam works its gentle magic. She watches him carefully, noting the subtle changes that indicate improvement, the relaxation in his shoulders, the deeper quality of his inhalations, the return of healthy color to his complexion. While her patient recovers, Livia tends to other tasks that fill her evening hours. She checks on tinctures that have been steeping for weeks, their alcohol bases slowly extracting the active compounds from carefully selected herbs. The amber liquids represent patience made manifest, healing that cannot be rushed, wisdom that develops slowly over time. She updates her mental inventory of supplies, noting which remedies are running low and which plants she will need to gather when morning comes. This constant awareness of resources reflects the practical wisdom of frontier life, the understanding that preparation today prevents crisis tomorrow. Her oil lamp casts dancing shadows on the walls as she works, creating an atmosphere of warmth and safety that extends beyond the physical space. Visitors often comment on the sense of peace they feel within these simple walls, as if the very air has been infused with healing intention. The healer's own presence contributes to this atmosphere of sanctuary. She moves with the calm assurance of someone who has found her calling, who understands her place in the larger pattern of community life. There is no anxiety in her gestures, no hurry in her preparations, only the steady rhythm of work performed with love. As the evening progresses, she reflects on the day's encounters, the remedies that brought relief, the conversations that provided comfort, the small victories that make her work meaningful. Each healing represents more than the resolution of symptoms. It is an affirmation of life's resilience, of the body's remarkable capacity for recovery when supported with wisdom and care. She's learned to find deep satisfaction in these modest triumphs. The fever that breaks, the wound that closes cleanly, the cough that finally subsides. These may seem like small things against the backdrop of war and uncertainty, but she understands their true significance. Each act of healing strengthens the fabric of community, creates ripples of wellness that extend far beyond the immediate patient. The old man's breathing has returned to normal, his color restored to healthy pink. She prepares a packet of herbs for him to take home, along with careful instructions for brewing and dosing. Her handwriting, though simple, is clear and precise, another small kindness that ensures her remedies will be used effectively. As he prepares to leave, he presses a small carved wooden bird into her palm, a token of gratitude crafted by his own weathered hands. She accepts it with the same gentle grace with which she offers her healing, understanding that the exchange of gifts creates bonds that strengthen communities. Alone again in her hut, Livia banks the fire and prepares for her own rest. Tomorrow will bring new patients, new challenges, new opportunities to serve. But tonight, there is satisfaction in work well done, in remedies carefully prepared, in comfort freely given. The healer's touch extends beyond the physical application of herbs and treatments. It encompasses the creation of sanctuary in uncertain times, the preservation of ancient wisdom, and the quiet courage required to dedicate one's life to the service of others' well-being. Crafting resilience, the leather worker's tale. Just as Livia tends to bodies with her gentle remedies, another figure shapes the frontier's daily life through the ancient art of working leather. In the workshop that adjoins the settlement's main thoroughfare, Marcus Fabius has spent the better part of 2 decades transforming raw hides into the essential goods that keep both soldiers and civilians protected against the harsh realities of frontier existence. The scent of tanned leather fills the air. Rich, earthy, speaking of patient processes and time-honored methods passed down through generations. Marcus learned his craft from his father, who learned from his father before him, creating an unbroken chain of knowledge that stretches back to the early days of the Republic. His hands, weathered and strong, move with the confidence that comes only from years of dedicated practice. The morning light filters through the workshop's single window, illuminating workbenches covered with the tools of his trade, curved knives with handles worn smooth by countless hours of use, awls for piercing precise holes, needles thick enough to penetrate multiple layers of hide, lengths of sinew and waxed thread wound carefully on wooden spools. Each tool has its purpose, its proper place, its role in the transformation of raw material into objects of lasting value. The leather itself arrives in various stages of preparation. Some hides come fresh from local hunters, still requiring the lengthy process of cleaning, soaking, and treating that will preserve them against decay. Others arrive already cured by traveling merchants, ready for cutting and shaping. Marcus has developed relationships with suppliers across the frontier region, understanding that the quality of his finished goods depends entirely on the materials he begins with. The process begins with careful examination, running experienced fingers across each hide to identify weak spots, natural grain patterns, areas of particular strength or flexibility. A piece destined to become a soldier's breastplate requires different qualities than leather meant for a merchant's saddlebags or a farmer's work boots. Marcus has learned to see potential in each piece, to envision the final product before making the first cut. For military clients, durability takes precedence over all other considerations. The leather armor that protects Roman soldiers must withstand not only enemy weapons, but also the daily wear of long marches, harsh weather, and the constant maintenance required of military equipment. Marcus cuts these pieces with extra thickness, reinforces stress points with additional layers, and uses the strongest stitching patterns his craft knowledge provides. The work requires both strength and precision. Cutting thick leather demands firm pressure and steady hands. The curved blade must follow predetermined patterns while accommodating the natural variations in each hide. Too much force risks cutting beyond the intended line. Too little leaves ragged edges that weaken the final product. Marcus has developed the muscle memory that allows him to work efficiently while maintaining the high standards his reputation depends upon. Civilian goods offer opportunities for different expressions of craftsmanship. A merchant's traveling pack must balance durability with weight considerations. A farmer's harness system requires flexibility and comfort for the animals that will wear it daily. Women's shoes demand both protection and a degree of refinement appropriate to their social station. Each commission brings its own challenges and satisfactions. The stitching process reveals the true artistry of leatherworking. Marcus uses various techniques depending on the item's intended purpose. Simple running stitches for basic construction, cross-stitching for areas requiring maximum strength, decorative patterns that serve both functional and aesthetic purposes. The rhythm of the work becomes almost meditative. Pierce, thread, pull tight, advance to the next position. Hours pass unnoticed as complex projects take shape under his patient attention. War brings both challenges and opportunities to the leather trade. Military demand increases dramatically, providing steady income for skilled craftsmen. However, the same conflicts that create demand also disrupt supply lines and make quality materials harder to obtain. Marcus has learned to maintain larger inventories during peaceful periods, preparing for the inevitable disruptions that accompany military campaigns. The relationship between craftsman and customer extends beyond simple commercial transactions. Soldiers returning from patrol often stop by the workshop to discuss modifications to their equipment. A strap that chafes during long marches, a buckle that loosens under stress, a piece of armor that restricts movement in crucial situations. Marcus listens carefully to these reports, incorporating feedback into future designs and building relationships that last throughout military careers. Repairs constitute a significant portion of the workshop's daily activity. Good leather goods, properly maintained, can last for years or even decades. But frontier life is hard on equipment, and even the finest craftsmanship eventually requires attention. Marcus takes pride in his ability to restore damaged items, sometimes making them stronger than their original construction through strategic reinforcement and improved design. The economic realities of frontier commerce require careful balance between quality and affordability. Wealthy merchants and senior military officers can afford premium goods crafted from the finest materials. Common soldiers and local farmers need functional items at prices their limited budgets can accommodate. Marcus has developed product lines that serve both markets, ensuring his workshop remains viable while maintaining his reputation for reliable craftsmanship. Apprenticeship traditions ensure the continuation of essential skills. Young men from the settlement sometimes approach Marcus seeking training in the leather trade. The learning process requires years of patient instruction, beginning with basic tasks like hide preparation and tool maintenance before advancing to cutting and stitching techniques. Not every apprentice completes the full training, but those who do carry forward knowledge that serves their communities for generations. The satisfaction of completed work provides daily rewards that sustain Marcus through the challenges of his profession. Watching a soldier adjust newly fitted armor with obvious pleasure, seeing a merchant's face light up when examining a perfectly constructed traveling pack, observing how a well-made pair of shoes changes a customer's posture and confidence. These moments validate the hours of careful labor invested in each project. Evening brings time for planning and preparation. Marcus reviews pending commissions, calculates material requirements, and prepares cutting patterns for the next day's work. The workshop grows quiet as the last customers depart and the sounds of settlement life settle into nighttime rhythms. Oil lamps cast warm light across workbenches where tomorrow's projects wait in various stages of completion. The leather trade connects Marcus to networks of commerce and communication that span the frontier region. Traveling merchants bring news along with raw materials. Military customers share information about conditions in distant postings. Fellow craftsmen exchange techniques and trade secrets during market gatherings. Through his workshop passes a constant stream of information that helps him adapt to changing conditions and opportunities. As Marcus banks the fire that heats his workshop and secures valuable tools against the night, he reflects on the day's accomplishments. Leather goods completed and delivered, new commissions discussed and planned, apprentices instructed in techniques that will serve them throughout their careers, the steady rhythm of productive work that transforms raw materials into objects of lasting value and genuine utility. The leatherworker's craft embodies principles that transcend any single trade or profession. Patient attention to quality, respect for materials and tools, commitment to continuous improvement through experience and observation, the satisfaction that comes from creating something useful, something that will serve its owner faithfully through years of demanding use. In a world where so much seems temporary and uncertain, the products of skilled craftsmanship offer reassuring permanence. Well-made leather goods outlast their original owners, passing to new hands that appreciate their enduring utility. Through his daily work, Marcus contributes to the accumulated wealth of human knowledge and skill that sustains civilization even in the most challenging circumstances. Letters from afar. Echoes of Rome. The morning air carries more than the usual sounds of frontier life when the supply wagon arrives from the south. Among the practical necessities, oil for lamps, grain for bread, fresh parchment for my records, there is something I have been hoping for yet dreading in equal measure, a letter bearing the seal of my family in Rome. My hands tremble slightly as I break the wax, not from the cold morning air, but from the weight of distance that such correspondence carries. How long has it been since I last heard news from home? 3 months, perhaps 4. Time moves differently here on the frontier, measured not by the familiar rhythms of Roman society, but by the changing needs of survival, the cycles of conflict and peace, the gradual shift of seasons across this vast landscape. The letter is written in my sister's careful hand, and I can almost hear her voice as I read. She writes of the olive harvest on our family's small estate outside the city, how the trees bent heavy with fruit this year, their silver-green leaves catching the autumn light. She describes the familiar ritual of gathering, the oil press working from dawn to dusk, the satisfaction of filling jar after jar with liquid gold that will sustain them through the winter months. But beneath these comforting details of home, there is news that makes my chest tighten with grief. Our father, she writes, has grown frail this past season. The man who once carried me on his shoulders through the forum, who taught me to read by tracing letters in the dust with a stick, now struggles to walk from his bed to the garden he loves. She does not say it directly, but I understand. This may be the last letter that carries news of him in this world. The contrast strikes me with unexpected force. Here on the frontier, I witness daily acts of quiet heroism. Women like Livia healing the wounded, craftsmen like Marcus creating beauty and utility from raw materials, families adapting to circumstances that would have seemed impossible in the comfortable predictability of Roman city life. Yet there, in the heart of the empire, the people I love most are facing their own battles against time and mortality, and I am too far away to offer comfort or support. My sister's letter continues with news of friends and neighbors, marriages and births, the small dramas that weave together to form the fabric of ordinary life. She mentions that the bakery near the Pantheon has changed hands, that the old baker's son has taken over and makes bread that is almost as good as his father's. She writes of festivals and celebrations, of the way the city fills with music and laughter during the feast days, of children running through streets that I walked as a boy. Reading these details, I am struck by how distant that world seems now, not just in miles, but in understanding. The concerns that once felt so important, the social hierarchies, the political maneuvering, the endless pursuit of status and recognition, seem almost incomprehensible from this vantage point where survival and genuine human connection matter more than reputation or wealth. But there is something else in the letter that catches my attention. My sister mentions that she has been reading the philosophical writings that have become popular among educated Romans, the personal reflections of our emperor, Marcus Aurelius. She has copied out a passage that she thought might bring me comfort in this distant place, and as I read his words, I feel a connection that spans the vast distance between frontier and capital. Accept the things to which fate binds you, the emperor writes, and love the people with whom fate associates you. These simple words carry a weight of wisdom that seems perfectly suited to life on this frontier. Here, we do not choose our circumstances. We are bound by the necessities of defense, by the unpredictable rhythms of conflict and peace, by the harsh realities of distance from everything familiar. Yet within these constraints, we find ways to love, to create, to support one another. The emperor continues, "The universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it." I think of Livia, transforming her knowledge of healing plants into comfort for the suffering. I think of Marcus, turning rough hides into objects of lasting beauty and utility. I think of all the unnamed women and men I have observed, taking whatever materials fate provides and creating something meaningful, something that serves life rather than diminishing it. Later that morning, I find myself walking to Livia's dwelling, the letter still in my hand. She is tending her herb garden, carefully harvesting the last of the season's chamomile, her movements gentle and deliberate. When she sees my expression, she sets aside her gathering basket and invites me to sit on the wooden bench outside her door. "News from home?" she asks, and there is understanding in her voice. She knows the particular sadness that comes with letters from distant places, how they can bring both comfort and pain, connecting us to what we love while reminding us of what we cannot reach. I share with her the news of my father's failing health, and she listens with the same attention she gives to her patients' descriptions of their ailments. When I finish, she is quiet for a moment, then speaks of her own father, who died when she was still learning her craft. "The love doesn't end," she says simply. "It just changes form. Instead of flowing between us in conversation and shared moments, it becomes something we carry within ourselves, a warmth that never quite fades." I read to her the passage from Marcus Aurelius, and she nods thoughtfully. "Your emperor understands something that we learn here every day," she says. "We cannot control what happens to us, but we can choose how we respond. We can choose to create beauty, to offer healing, to build connections that make life more bearable for everyone around us." As we sit together in the morning sun, I realize that this conversation itself is an example of what the emperor describes. Fate has brought me to this frontier, far from family and familiar comforts, but it has also associated me with people like Livia, whose wisdom and compassion have taught me things I could never have learned in the comfortable libraries of Rome. The afternoon passes quietly as I work on my records, but my thoughts keep returning to the letter and to the emperor's words. By evening, as I prepare for sleep, I understand something new about my purpose here. I am not just documenting military events or administrative details. I am recording the ways that ordinary people transform the circumstances fate provides into something meaningful, how they love the people fate associates them with, even in the most challenging conditions. The stars above this frontier camp are the same stars that shine over Rome tonight, over my aging father and my worried sister, over the emperor himself as he contemplates the responsibilities of ruling an empire. Under this vast sky, the distance between us seems both infinite and negligible. We are all part of something larger than our individual struggles, all finding ways to create light in whatever darkness surrounds us. The watchtower's vigil, a moment of stillness. The morning brings with it a different kind of clarity, one that settles into the bones like warmth from a well-tended fire. Marcus rises early, as is his custom, but today something calls him away from his workbench, away from the familiar rhythm of his tools and the comforting scent of leather and oil. The watchtower stands at the camp's eastern edge, its wooden frame weathered but sturdy, built to last through seasons of vigilance. Few venture up its ladder during the quiet hours before dawn, when the sentries change their watch and the world holds its breath between night and day. But Marcus finds himself drawn to its height this morning, his craftsman's hands gripping each rung with the same careful attention he brings to his work below. The climb is longer than he remembers, each step taking him further from the familiar sounds of the waking camp. Below, he can hear the soft murmur of voices, the gentle clatter of morning preparations, the distant lowing of cattle being led to pasture. But with each rung, these sounds grow softer, more distant, until they become part of a larger symphony that includes the whisper of wind through grass and the liquid notes of birds greeting the dawn. At the top, the world opens before him, like a scroll being unrolled by patient hands. The Danube stretches away to the north, its waters catching the early light and throwing it back in scattered diamonds. Beyond the river, the land rolls away in gentle swells, covered in the deep green of forests that have stood since before Rome was even a dream in the minds of shepherds. To the south, The road that connects this frontier outpost to the heart of the empire disappears into morning mist, but Marcus knows it's there. That invisible thread that binds this remote place to the marble forums and bustling markets of the eternal city. The wind at this height carries different messages than it does at ground level. Here, it speaks of vast distances, of weather patterns forming far beyond the horizon, of the patient turning of seasons across landscapes that stretch beyond human comprehension. Marcus closes his eyes and lets it wash over him, feeling the way it moves around his body, how it carries the scents of wild herbs and distant rain, the promise of change and the comfort of continuity. When he opens his eyes again, the sun has climbed higher, painting the world in shades of gold and amber that make even the most ordinary things seem touched by something sacred. The camp below looks different from this perspective. Smaller, certainly, but also more purposeful. He can see the careful planning in its layout, the way each building serves not just its immediate function, but contributes to the larger pattern of survival and community. His own workshop sits near the center, its roof marked by the small chimney that carries away the smoke from his forge. Even from here, he can imagine the tools waiting on their appointed hooks, the leather soaking in its baths, the half-finished bridles and sword belts that will soon find their way to the hands of those who need them. But seeing it from this distance, Marcus understands something new about his work, something that the daily rhythm of cutting and stitching and polishing had perhaps obscured. Each piece he creates is not just an object, but a connection. The belt that will hold a soldier's sword becomes part of that man's confidence, his ability to protect what he loves. The sandals crafted for a merchant's journey carry not just his feet, but his dreams, his hopes for profit and safe return to family. The leather itself tells stories that reach back through time, from the cattle that grazed these same hills to the tanners who transformed hide into something useful, to his own hands that shape it into objects of beauty and purpose. In this single chain of creation, he touches the lives of dozens of people, most of whom he will never meet, but all of whom are connected to him through the ancient alchemy of craft. A hawk circles overhead, riding the thermals with an ease that speaks of perfect adaptation to its environment. Marcus watches its lazy spirals and thinks about resilience, not the dramatic kind celebrated in songs and stories, but the quiet persistence that allows ordinary people to thrive in extraordinary circumstances. Like this bird, like the grass that bends but doesn't break in the wind, like the river that finds its way around every obstacle, true strength often lies not in resistance, but in flexibility. The women of this frontier understand this instinctively. He has watched Livia work with her herbs, seen how she adapts her treatments to each patient's needs, how she finds healing properties in plants that others might dismiss as weeds. He has observed the wives and daughters of soldiers, how they create homes from the most basic materials, how they maintain traditions and pass down wisdom while constantly adapting to new challenges. There is beauty in this adaptation, Marcus realizes. Beauty in the way human ingenuity responds to necessity, in the way communities form and reform around the fundamental needs of shelter, sustenance, and connection. From this height, he can see it all laid out like a living map. The gardens where families grow their food, the paths worn smooth by countless feet walking between essential destinations, the small spaces where children play and learn and grow into the next generation of survivors and thrivers. The sun climbs higher, and with it comes the gentle sounds of the day's work beginning in earnest. But Marcus remains at his post a little longer, storing up this moment of perspective like a craftsman storing up materials for future use. He knows that when he climbs back down, when he returns to the detailed work of his trade, this broader view will remain with him, a reminder that every small act of creation contributes to something larger and more enduring than any individual life. The wind shifts slightly, bringing with it the scent of bread baking and the sound of familiar voices calling to one another across the compound. It's time to descend, to return to the work that waits. But he carries with him now a deeper understanding of why that work matters, why the patient repetition of ancient skills serves not just immediate needs, but the longer story of human persistence and grace. Below, the world of details awaits, but above, the vast sky continues its eternal watch, reminding all who pause to look up that they are part of something infinitely larger and more beautiful than their daily struggles might suggest. Embers of the day, finding peace within. The scribe descends from the watchtower as evening settles over the frontier camp, his steps measured and thoughtful, carrying within him the expansive vision he has just witnessed. The day's heat gives way to cooler air that moves through the settlement like a gentle blessing, stirring the canvas of tents and carrying with it the mingled scents of wood smoke, leather, and the wild herbs that grow along the riverbank. He finds Livia tending to her evening fire, the flames dancing lower now as she prepares her simple meal. The orange light catches the weathered lines of her face, each one a testament to years of careful attention to others' needs. And Marcus approaches from his workshop, his hands finally clean of the day's work, his leather apron exchanged for a simple tunic that speaks of rest rather than labor. "Join me," Livia says without looking up, her voice carrying the same gentle authority she brings to her healing work. "There's enough for 3, and the fire burns better with company." They settle around the glowing embers, 3 figures drawn together by the natural magnetism of shared warmth and shared humanity. The meal is simple. Bread that Marcus has bartered for with his work, dried meat from Livia's stores, and water flavored with mint that she has gathered from the stream. But in this moment, with the frontier settling into its evening rhythms around them, the food tastes of abundance. "I climbed the tower today," Marcus says, his voice quiet in the gathering dusk. "Saw the whole settlement from above. Saw how everything connects." Livia nods, understanding immediately what he means. The view changes everything, doesn't it? When you can see the whole pattern instead of just your piece of it. The scribe watches them both, these two who have found their ways of creating meaning in this place between worlds, and feels again that sense of privilege he experienced earlier, the recognition that he is witnessing something precious and rare. "In Rome," he says slowly, "we speak often of great deeds, of monuments and conquests, but sitting here, I think perhaps the greater courage lies in the daily choice to tend the fire, to heal the wound, to shape the leather with care." The fire crackles softly between them, sending small sparks up into the darkening sky where they join the first stars beginning to appear. Around them, the camp settles into its evening patterns, the murmur of quiet conversations, the distant sound of someone playing a simple melody on a wooden flute, the soft footsteps of the night watch beginning their rounds. "My grandmother used to say," Livia speaks into the comfortable silence, "that every day we're given small chances to add beauty to the world, or to take it away. She said the secret was learning to recognize those moments when they came." Marcus shifts a piece of wood in the fire, watching the flames leap higher for a moment before settling back into their steady glow. "I think I'm finally beginning to see them," he says. "Those moments. They're everywhere, aren't they? In the way you set a stitch, in the way you mix a healing tea, in the way you listen when someone needs to be heard." The scribe thinks of his morning's writing, of his decision to document not the strategic movements of legions, but the quiet resilience of people like these, and he understands that he too has been learning to recognize those moments, to choose beauty over mere duty, connection over mere observation. "When I was younger," he admits, "I thought wisdom meant having answers to the great questions. Now I wonder if it might mean something simpler, learning to be present for the small graces that appear each day." Livia smiles, her eyes reflecting the firelight. Present and grateful. My patients teach me that, even in their pain, especially in their pain, they show me how precious it is just to be here, just to breathe, just to feel the warmth of fire on your face. The conversation flows like the river nearby, unhurried and natural, touching on memories and hopes with equal gentleness. Marcus speaks of his father's hands guiding his own when he first learned to work leather, of the satisfaction that comes from creating something both beautiful and useful. Livia shares stories of herbs gathered in different seasons, of the way certain plants seem to offer themselves when they're most needed, of the quiet joy she finds in watching someone's pain ease under her care. The scribe listens and occasionally shares his own reflections about letters from home that carry both sorrow and comfort, about the way writing can become a form of prayer when approached with the right intention, about the unexpected gift of finding friendship in this unlikely place. As the fire burns lower, their voices grow softer, the pauses between words longer and more peaceful. The frontier night wraps around them like a gentle embrace, and they become part of its larger symphony. The distant call of night birds, the whisper of wind through grass, the eternal murmur of the river finding its way toward the sea. I've been thinking, Marcus says, his voice barely above a whisper, about what you said yesterday, Livia, about how we carry each other's stories. Sitting here tonight, I feel the truth of that. We're all part of something larger than ourselves, aren't we? Part of it, and creating it, she responds. Every choice we make, every kindness we offer, it all becomes part of the great story that connects us to everyone who came before and everyone who will come after. The scribe nods, feeling the weight and wonder of that connection. Marcus Aurelius writes about the cosmic city, the idea that we're all citizens of the universe, all connected by invisible threads of purpose and care. I used to think that was just philosophy. Now I think it might be the most practical truth there is. The fire has burned down to glowing coals now, painting their faces with soft, warm light that seems to come from within as much as from the embers themselves. Around them, the camp has grown quiet. Most of its inhabitants settled into sleep, but the three friends remain, reluctant to break the spell of this perfect moment. Whatever comes tomorrow, Livia says softly, whatever challenges or sorrows or small joys, we'll meet them as we've learned to meet everything here, together, with attention, with care. Marcus reaches out to adjust the last piece of wood on the fire, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he's performing a ritual of gratitude. I used to think the frontier was a place of exile, he says. Now I think it might be where I learned to come home, to myself, to what really matters. The scribe feels tears gathering in his eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of privilege he feels in this moment. The recognition that he has been allowed to witness and record something sacred. When I write about this time, he says, when I try to capture what we found here, I hope I can convey not just the facts, but the feeling, the way it changes you to live with such attention to what's real. You will, Livia assures him, because you're writing from the heart now, not just from duty, and the heart always knows how to tell the truth. The last flames flicker and fade, leaving only the steady glow of coals that will warm them through the night's coolest hours. Above them, the stars shine with brilliant clarity in the unpolluted frontier sky, each one a distant fire maintaining its own faithful watch. The river continues its ancient song, carrying the day's heat toward the sea and bringing the promise of tomorrow's fresh beginning. They sit in comfortable silence now, three souls who have found in each other and in this unlikely place a glimpse of what human community can be when stripped of pretense and rooted in genuine care. The scribe knows he will remember this moment for the rest of his life, The way the firelight played across his friends' faces, the feeling of being completely present and completely accepted, the sense that despite all the uncertainty and struggle of frontier life, they have touched something eternal. "Thank you," he whispers, not sure if he's speaking to his companions, to the night itself, or to whatever force in the universe arranges such moments of grace. "Thank you," Livia echoes, her voice carrying the same note of wonder. "Thank you," Marcus completes, and in those simple words lies all the gratitude they feel for this day, this fire, this friendship that has sustained them through challenges they never could have imagined facing alone. As they finally rise to seek their rest, moving slowly like people reluctant to break a beautiful dream, the scribe carries with him the image of this evening, the way three very different people found in each other's company a reflection of the best that humans can be. He knows that tomorrow will bring its own demands and difficulties, that the frontier will continue to test their resilience and adaptability, but he also knows now with absolute certainty that they possess everything they need to meet whatever comes. Not because they are strong in isolation, but because they have learned the secret of being strong together. The coals glow softly in the darkness as they part ways, each carrying the warmth of shared understanding back to their individual rest, and in that gentle light lies the promise that such moments of connection and grace are not accidents, but possibilities that await us always, whenever we choose to gather around the fires of genuine care and create together the ancient miracle of human community, where stories are shared and burdens lightened, and the long day's journey toward wisdom finds its perfect rest in the simple recognition that we are not alone, that we are held always in the vast and tender embrace of a universe that speaks to us most clearly through the voices of those who choose to see us truly and love us well.